Good morning and welcome to our Meet a Missioner Monday check-in. This is our opportunity to check in with someone who was featured on Meet a Missioner Monday earlier in the year and see how they're doing, see what has changed and what they're working on now. We just want to try to keep all of you who have been watching up to date on what's happening with some of those you heard from earlier. So today we're going to be talking with Heidi Cerneka down at the US-Mexico border and hearing a little bit about what she's currently working on. But before we get to Heidi, I want to share a little bit of information and a few announcements with you. So first, I just wanted to remind you of our other Meet a Missioner Monday check-ins coming up. Like I mentioned today, we'll hear from Heidi Cerneka. August 31st at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, you can find the video from Abby Belt, who is in Haiti, updating us on her ministry. They should be back in school at that point in Haiti, so we'll see how that's going for them. And then on September 7th, we'll hear from Melissa and Evie Altman about how things are going there in El Salvador. As you probably noticed in that schedule, the 24th next week, there's a break in our Meet a Missioner Monday check-ins, and that's because we're having this very special panel to recognize 45 years of Maryknoll lay missioners going overseas. This is when the program was first formed by the Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers and the Maryknoll Sisters. So we'll have 5 different missioners with us. It'll be an hour-long panel. Each of our missioners is from a different decade of Maryknoll being in service, Liz being our first missioner who's been with us for 44 years, or our earliest missioner represented on the panel. And so we'll get to hear from each of them. They served in different parts of the world at different times, and to hear some of their stories and what they see as the future of mission. That will be right here on YouTube and Facebook Live, so be sure to check it out. If our conversation today with Heidi gets you, or you feel that passion rising about issues of immigration, there is going to be a webinar tomorrow hosted by the Maryknoll Office of Global Concerns, looking at what we can do, how we can raise our voices in support of immigrants here in the United States. It's just a half an hour long webinar starting at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. To register, go to maryknollogc.org and look for the policy briefings tab. If you click on that, there'll be a registration for that webinar and information on some of their past webinars. We will be back to sort of our normal structure of Meet a Missioner Monday live shows starting on September 14th. And we'll be looking at 3 different themes throughout the fall and early winter. First, we'll focus on food security, hearing from missioners around the world who are focusing on that issue or who are working on food security. Then we'll hear from those involved with migration, some who are working on push factors, pull factors, and everything in between. And then last, we'll talk with some of our missioners and returned missioners working with people living with disabilities. So we hope you'll continue to tune in at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for all of those great interviews with the missioners. And last, if you haven't already and you have been watching our Meet a Missioner Mondays, please take a moment to take our survey. This really helps us to improve the program and to provide you with the information you would like to hear from our missioners. So you can follow that link on the screen, and that will take you to a survey, and you can give us feedback on what you've liked about Meet a Missioner Monday or what you would change. So with that, I will turn it over to Heidi for her update, and until I see you next week at that panel, be well, stay safe, and peace be with you.
Hi, welcome back to Meet a Missioner Monday. My name is Heidi Cerneka. I'm a lay missioner, and on June 15th, I did a program about working at the border as an attorney. And today I'm just going to give a small update on that. Please feel free to continue watching, and you can see the original program from June 15th or invite anybody else to join you. Thanks. The reality here changes by the day, as decisions that are made far away have profound effects on those we serve, and on all of us who are working for justice, and all of us who are working to uphold our U.S. commitment to the UN Convention on Refugees and our own Immigration and Naturalization Act. Policies are made, unmade, remade at a speed that is dizzying to me. Of course, the government is a living thing, and things change constantly. But decisions, laws, and policies that have come down in the last year far exceed what I would say is normal for change and having to adapt. What's hardest for me is that pretty much all of the decisions are not really about immigration, about nation building, about what's best for us as a people. They're really about politics, and they don't consider all the people that are affected by what's happening here. They're about promoting a certain agenda. Here at the border, we deal with the fallout from that, and it plays out in real people's lives, in families, in life and death situations. Why do people cross the border illegally? Because long before COVID, we made it impossible for them to exercise their right to ask for asylum. In order to ask for asylum, you have to be on US soil. And so we as a country have put our Border Patrol right across the line on Mexican soil to ask people for ID when they approach. And if they don't have a visa or permission to enter, we don't let them cross the line. And so they can't ask for asylum at the border. When you're desperate, when you've fled your home and your country because of government violence, because of police violence, because of gang violence, you've left everything behind, your family, your culture, your language, everything. By the time you get here, you're desperate to ask for asylum. And so if we're going to shut the door, people are going to find another way to come into the country and ask for asylum. The UN Convention says we can't hold it against somebody, the way that they enter a country when they're asking for asylum. So let me give you a true life example. Maria was brought to the United States in 1992 when she was 3 years old. She's lived her whole life here. Her parents had other children who were all US citizens because they were born here. Maria has never been able to hold a legal job because she's been undocumented her entire life. This has caused all manner of psychological and physical problems in her life: low self-esteem, bad and violent relationships, maladaptive behaviors because of the violence and the low self-esteem. She has US children and is no longer with their father for the same reason, because he was abusive and violent. And it's hard to go to the police when you're the victim of a crime and somebody keeps threatening to call immigration on you. Someone once asked me why in all these years Maria has never gotten her immigration status in order. It's a fair question. Of course she would have wanted that, but it's not easy. She could have applied for DACA, but because of things in her life, she dropped out of school. Later, she was busy feeding her children since their father did nothing to help support them. It's also expensive to file for immigration relief. It costs money. You have to keep documents. You have to prove to the government that you have good character, that you're not a public charge. And when you can't get a legitimate job, you can't show pay stubs. You can't show a lease. You can't prove that you've lived here long enough to get status. It's wonderful people that collect all of their high school certificates, all the church participation. But when you're someone like Maria and all you're trying to do is make enough money to feed your kids for the next day, you don't have time for that. And so Maria is now 31 years old and undocumented. She got in trouble, a stupid mistake that many people make, but because she's undocumented, she's not allowed to make stupid mistakes. Now her only hope to stay here in the US with her 2 kids who have suffered a lot and need support and special education is to convince a judge on August 17th that he should cancel her removal from the US and allow her to stay here because of the hardship she suffered at the hands of a US citizen. And because of the hardships her kids have suffered. Our chances are very slim. That's my job, is to keep the door open on her chances. So here's the thing, finally. First of all, if we had a more comprehensive immigration policy that wasn't almost 30 years outdated, she wouldn't be in this situation today. So that's on us as a nation. She's lived here for almost 30 years. We, the police, the community, the laws, have not protected her from all of the violence she's suffered at the hands of US citizens. We're trying to send her back to a country she doesn't know, a culture she doesn't know, where she'll be treated as a foreigner. More importantly, I've worked with her for over a year now. She's a good person. She's getting counseling by phone from the Immigration Detention Center. She has her kids in special schools because of the trauma they've suffered and the needs they have. She's constantly referring other women to me because she knows that they need help. She deserves this chance. She deserves to stay here, to continue to get the help she needs to recover and that of her kids. And we need people like her in our community. I tell you about Maria for two reasons. One, to give you a sense of how complex our immigration system is and the real human beings who are affected by that. While our Congress is too busy squabbling over party lines and working for re-election to do their jobs to come up with a better immigration policy. But I also tell you this so that you remember Maria on August 17th, so that maybe for the first time in her life, she gets a fair shot at justice in this country. Remember her, please, and her children, and her judge, and her attorney. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to Meet a Missioner Monday. My name is Karen Bortvet-Estrada and I will be your host today. For those of you that are new to Meet a Missioner Monday, or this is your first time tuning in, welcome. We are delighted to have you. If you'd like to see any of our past interviews, you can check those out on YouTube or Facebook, talking about issues related to waters rights, gender-based violence, from Brazil to Tanzania to El Salvador. All those interviews are online, so we hope you'll check those out. This is our opportunity each week to check in with those around the world that we work with, our missioners and those they serve alongside. Especially in these times of physical distancing, we want to continue to draw ourselves close to those who have been marginalized in the world. And this is one way that we can do that. So thank you for joining us in that experience. As we gather today, we want to especially remember those who are struggling in this time of pandemic from loss of any kind. We also remember those who continue to work for racial justice. And given that World Refugee Day, the UN holiday, is coming up on June 20th, Saturday, we are remembering people on the move, refugees, asylees, migrants of all kinds, people outside their homelands, and those who work alongside them. Our focus today is going to be talking about migration. We will be joined by Heidi Cerneka, who is a Maryknoll lay missioner. She's continuing a legacy that started in 1995 when the Maryknoll lay missioners began sending missioners to El Paso, Texas and Ciudad Juarez on the US-Mexico border. Heidi works as an immigration attorney there. She is a graduate of St. Mary's University. She served as a Jesuit volunteer and received her law degree from Loyola University in Chicago. She has also served as a lay missioner in Brazil and in Kenya, so brings that wealth of knowledge with her to her current ministries. So welcome, Heidi. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning. Thanks for the invite. Just one quick correction. I graduated from St. Mary's College. There's lots of St. Mary's around the country, but I graduated from St. Mary's College in South Bend, Indiana.
Thank you for that. I get the St. Mary's confused. So St. Mary's College, South Bend. Thank you for being with us, Heidi. And we want to start out, from my experience, all of us in life, we have lots of different encounters and experiences that shape our life path and sort of lead us to where we are. So I was wondering if you could share with us some of the people or encounters that you've had that led you to where you are now in mission.
Sure. That's really a tricky question because there are so many people and so many names and so many faces that have shaped who I am today. So the first person I just want to touch on briefly, I spent 18 years working in Brazil with human rights and incarcerated women. And no doubt I learned far more than they did. No doubt they deepened me as a person and me as a person of faith far more probably than I touched their lives. But I just wanted to name like all of those women that you see on your slide. And Elisa, who had nobody, was so tenacious, lived in the streets, and was her own best advocate, constantly taught me. And every time I saw her, she was just so enthusiastic, despite the challenges that life had dealt her. She would just scream across the main plaza of Sao Paulo, "Hi there!" And yeah, so she's one of the people that touched my life. But moving to the border, I also wanted to name a few of the people that have touched my life here at the border. And you can tell because when I think of these people, and I've worked 20 years ago with Elisa, like the name will never leave me. So just to identify one person here, the person in the middle is Elizabeth. The person on the right is Connie Lara, the paralegal that works with me.
But Elizabeth is a great example of human spirit and human resilience, and also pretty much everything that's gone wrong in our country as far as migration. Elizabeth came at the age of 3 with her parents, and she's now 31. She's never been able to hold a legal job because she's never had legal status in this country. Has no memory of living in Mexico, where she came from. But because of that, she's been through a series of bad jobs, bad relationships, and is currently in the process of being in deportation proceedings. And so I am Elizabeth's attorney, and super complicated case, but she just inspires me with her resilience and her hope and her love of her children and love of her family and her world right here in El Paso.
Thank you for sharing a bit about those. And you can see my camera has just adjusted, so you're seeing behind the curtain here a little bit. Welcome to everyone who is just joining us. We are interviewing Heidi Cerneka, who is an immigration attorney working in El Paso, Texas. She is sharing with us a little bit about her ministry. If you do have questions, or if you want to let us know where you're watching from, please drop those in the comments. Depending on the platform in which you're watching, the comment section is either going to be below this video or it's going to be off, I believe, to the right-hand side. So put your questions there for Heidi. Let us know where you're watching from so that we know you're here with us. Heidi, can you tell us a little bit about what sort of your day-to-day looks like? What is the ministry you're serving in there in El Paso?
I will make my best attempt. So I am an immigration attorney here in El Paso. I work with an organization called Las Americas Immigrant Advocacy Center. Las Americas has 3 kind of different routes, or 3 different departments that we work with. And so I work with what's called the detained migrant defense. I'm working with people that are in immigration detention. The vast majority are people that are seeking asylum in the United States because they've fled horrific situations, horrific conditions in their countries of origin. I'm working with some people like Elizabeth, who's also in detention, who's not asking for asylum. She's just asking for the US to consider allowing her to stay so that she can be with her US citizen children and family. When I think about like what my ministry is, I think it's faith-based witness. And I don't mean witness as kind of a sideline person. I mean that in the action sense, but faith-based. And I think my witness is here in the work I do, but also in the communities around the country, right? So the Marino world, the church world, my family and friends, how is what I'm doing to work with migrants at this moment in history, how is that affected by my faith, and how should it affect my faith? Actually, I think both of them. And so then the other piece I would just say is, of course, I'm an advocate. I work mostly with individual cases, but then trying to consider how those cases bring a bigger picture into view. And so I'm an advocate for justice and for access to justice, in a nutshell.
I think those are all important roles to have on your shoulders and big ones to take on. We have a question actually that has already come in. If anyone else has questions, please be sure to put those in the comments, and we are happy to forward those on to Heidi. This question comes from our very own Mary Edgar, who is wondering, how has the COVID pandemic affected your work and the immigration process?
Whew, so many different ways. My work directly, I would say, I now do almost all of my work from home, including hearings. So I'm on the phone with courts. Technology is not good enough to be video. So if I have a hearing, I'm on the phone. I can't go see my clients. So I'm talking to my clients on the phone. I think also for those of us who are working with people in detention, it's like ramped up the voltage. So we're desperate to get people out of detention because we all know that hospitals, shelters, detention centers, are places where infection increases and spreads so much faster because they're closed environments where people don't have the freedom to distance and move away. So we have worked extremely hard nonstop. This has not been a sabbatical for me to get people out of detention. And the other thing is that for all sorts of reasons, the El Paso ICE detention center has been sending people, they're coming into El Paso, they're sending them out. So in an effort not to abandon people at this time of COVID-19, we're not, normally if somebody leaves El Paso, we say, I can't represent you. You know, we're a small organization, but we're not doing that. So I have clients right now in Natchez, Mississippi, Bastille, Louisiana, somewhere in Georgia. And so that makes it even more complicated because I'm working with them by phone in a facility I don't know, with judges I don't know. So this is a really long answer, but my part, it's just gotten much more intense because we're working so hard to get people out of that environment of detention to somewhere safe. All of them that we're doing that for have a sponsor who's taking responsibility. They still have asylum cases and proceedings that they have to be part of. So it's not just shortcutting the system. And I think just one more thing I would say is that we also work a lot with what's called the Remain in Mexico, or MPP, Migrant Protection Protocol program, which really doesn't protect anyone. And so those people are all in Mexico, and COVID-19 has been a nightmare because their cases, they're stuck in shelters in Mexico, at risk because they're very vulnerable, and every time they turn around, their case is being delayed again and again and again because the courts are closed for their cases and they're not allowed to cross the border. So it's had really negative effects on the people that we work with.
Heidi, one question that I have, because we're celebrating UN Refugee Day coming up on Saturday, in non-lawyer terms, the terms that all of us can understand, can you help us to understand what makes someone a refugee versus maybe some of the other migrants that you're working with, folks that are coming to this country?
Sure. So really short, well, short compared to what it could be. Let's just say that. After World War II, there were refugees all over the world, and the UN, as it formed and came together, realized that we needed some kind of structure to guarantee that these refugees got the assistance they needed, were able to settle. And so there was a UN Refugee Convention. And in a nutshell, a convention with the UN is a law for us, because a convention means our government signs it and then we ratify it in Congress. So that becomes binding law. We didn't sign that law, but as there were more and more refugees in the world, in 1967, they said, oh, this shouldn't just be for people from World War II. Anyone who is fleeing their country because of a threat of persecution, because of actual persecution, and that needs to be political persecution, it can be economic, but basically somebody who's fleeing persecution based on their religion, their race, their nationality, their political opinion, or because they belong to a specific group that's being persecuted, should have protection and should at least be able to ask for asylum. So in 1967, the UN said, wow, this is bigger than just World War II. And so they said, anyone in that kind of situation deserves protection. And the US did sign that. So when we're talking about refugees and asylum, we're talking about people that are knocking on our door, or Canada's door, or Australia's door, or the door of another country that's not their own. They've left their country of origin. And they're saying, my life, my safety, my freedom is at risk in my home country, and I need your protection. And so they have to go through a whole process. They have to go through a whole process where they demonstrate what their risk is, what the persecution is, and how they fit those categories. They have to fit one of those categories that was political, religious, nationality, ethnicity, or part of a particular group. So just to finish my short, for what could be very long, explanation, that doesn't fit climate change. That's not drought. That's not poverty. It has to fit one of those categories. And so so the refugees that we're working with are people that have come and asked to be considered refugees because they fled their country. And in our job, where I'm working with people in detention, is to give them a little bit more access to a fair opportunity to present their case and be considered refugees. I don't know if that was enough, but if not, ask another question.
That was great. Thank you, Heidi. And I think you did a great job summarizing that in as short a way humanly possible. For those just joining, we are talking to Heidi Cerneka, who is a Maryknoll lay missioner and immigration attorney working in El Paso, Texas. Remember, if you do have any questions for Heidi, be sure to put those in the comments. And we have a whole bunch that are coming in, Heidi, as promised. Kip Hardgrave, it says, I know someone in Syracuse who has gone to the border several times to work for a week or two. He doesn't speak Spanish. Is there anything such folks can do for you?
There used to be. A year ago, we were desperately needing help for people to welcome the migrants that were arriving, that were asking for refugee status, that were asking for asylum, and were being put in those court cases, but also being allowed to do that from the safety of a family home or something like that. Unfortunately, this current administration has been shutting that door and making it smaller and smaller and smaller. And I would say for political reasons, not for really anything to do with what's a refugee and what's not a refugee. And because of that, we've had less and less people knocking at our door and needing help right here at the border. And on top of that, right now, the border is closed to migrants, which I would say is actually a violation of the UN Convention and even our own US immigration law. So there is not a great need for volunteers right now here. I think there are refugees all over the country that are still in proceedings, still need to go to court, probably still need support. But here right now, we are not needing volunteers. Hopefully we will again soon, because I think having this robust asylum program is extremely important to those who are asking for help and important to our country as we honor the laws we pass. Right now, there is not a great need.
Heidi, you just mentioned folks that are around the country that are still in those proceedings, and Claire actually asked a question about that. She said, what are the years on trial notices asylum seekers are receiving right now? When I worked with asylum seekers in 2015, many people were receiving trial dates for 2020. Have these time gaps gotten better or worse?
So right now, everything is up for grabs. I mean, right now, everything changes by the minute. The non-detained court is closed. So if somebody is just reopening after it closed down in March for COVID-19. So if somebody who is, for instance, in Chicago in asylum proceedings, I have a client whose next hearing is February of 2021. It's not his final hearing. It's probably his hearing to turn in everything for his asylum. So when he goes to that hearing, they'll schedule a following hearing. I really have no idea for non-detained. And it really depends on the courts. I have somebody else who was scheduled 3 months from now, but really depends on the courts and how busy they are.
We have another question from, I guess, a neighbor of mine, someone who says great supporter and admirer in Maryland. So they must be my neighbor because that's where I am at. Stephen asks, or Stefan, I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly there. Can you share what you have learned about the conditions of confinement in detention centers? Are some better than others?
I would say yes. Immigration detention, remember that immigration it's a civil detention. These aren't people that have committed crimes. So it's actually heart-wrenching and affront to what I think we are as a nation, that we have people who have never committed a crime in a detention, which, as a client once said, if I have to ask for permission to take a shower, I'm in jail. I do think they are different depending on where you are. One of my clients in Louisiana, so some people are detained in privatized facilities that the US government pays to run. And those conditions are definitely different. I can't give you I've never been actually all the way in, so I can't give you exact specifics, but I know one of the women in Louisiana talked about, I can't even remember now, but she was horrified by the conditions there, and she had been detained here in El Paso. Just, I think, all the restrictions, the fact that it's a jail facility that's been like repurposed for immigration detention. Yeah, and I think just knowing that these are people who are coming from traumatic, horrifying situations most of the time, and being put in jail. I know that doesn't specifically answer your question, but they're basically jail conditions or prison conditions.
Another question in terms of working and coordinating your work. Kirsten DeMello, or Kirsten, again, I'm sorry if I'm saying folks' names wrong here, is wondering if you coordinate your work with other agencies such as Annunciation House. And then I want to pair with that a question from Ted Parks, who wanted to follow up on Kip's question and asked if there's a need for Spanish speakers to volunteer in El Paso, or if across the board volunteers aren't so needed at this time.
We definitely, El Paso is an amazing community. It's an amazing community that really organizes and works together. So Las Americas is an advocacy center for immigrants that was founded over 40 years ago, specifically by the same people that founded Annunciation House. Annunciation House is this impressive, historic system that has been receiving and sheltering detained migrants also for over 40 years, and runs completely on volunteers. I mean, at one point, there were 800 people in their shelters in any given day, and it was run totally on volunteers: meals, showers, phone calls, transportation, everything. And so Las Americas was founded by the same people that founded Annunciation House, or Ruben Garcia with other people, as kind of the legal arm of Annunciation House. So we definitely work in partnership with them, the Diocesan Migrant and Refugee Services, which is really kind of the Catholic Charities here. We have partners that work on more advocacy issues where they're looking at policy, not just individual immigrants. And actually other nationwide organizations, you know, the ACLU, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, we partner a lot. Interestingly, the work done in Juarez with the people in Remain in Mexico, our two greatest partners are Clinic, which is the Catholic Legal Immigration Network, and HIAS, which is the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which I also knew when I was in Kenya. And to answer Ted's question, right now, we don't need a lot of Spanish-speaking volunteers here. Las Americas is always using, for example, Spanish speakers to work from remote to help us with translating documents, doing research, things like that. But here in El Paso, Annunciation House is the one that has traditionally used a lot more on-site volunteers. They have a great website with a volunteer application process and everything, and they're looking for people, they were at a time looking for people that could come for at least 2 weeks. Right now, I know volunteers that are here in El Paso that aren't going to Annunciation House because there's not that much for them to do. So if somebody's interested in volunteering, one, I would wait till COVID-19 ends and see how things change or don't change. Check out the Las Americas website, check out the Annunciation website, Annunciation House website, and maybe check us back out in November.
Those are great tips. I would just add to Heidi's tip about looking for ways to volunteer that there are so many refugee resettlement programs around the country, and there are great networks around those. So there might even be someone right in your neighborhood that could just use, you know, someone to figure out how to navigate things. I remember when I moved to Cambodia, which is the closest experience I've ever had to moving to a new country, like just figuring out how to pay electric bills and get water and things like that. It's nice to have someone who knows the system. So there might be ways in folks' local community that you can get involved and help. We do have more questions coming in. Winnie Victor is wondering, are there a lot of silent raids in your area where you're at? And maybe if you could also tell us sort of what that means for those who might not understand that term, silent raids.
I'm going to guess. I would say no. El Paso is fairly immigrant friendly. Remember, El Paso is a city that is 80% Latino or and is a very immigrant friendly community. So we don't see that here. And when Winnie refers to silent raids, I'm guessing you're talking about when ICE, especially the government immigration police, go into a community to try to round up people that they consider undocumented and a threat to national security, even though our presidents and our government have consistently said that they're only concerned with people that are dangerous. The truth is that the people getting rounded up are often just people that were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And just a follow up on the last thing that you were saying, Karen, when I talk to people often on the what to do, I like to do this kind of a spiel of what can you do? And I think it's everything, like Karen pointed out, in your own community. Where are the migrants? What are needs? They might be driving people places. They might be helping people learn English, vote, run for office, please, help people register to vote, engage in our local communities, and I think try to educate ourselves and each other as much as we can about these issues. And for me, that also means thinking bigger than MSNBC and Fox News. Broaden our perspective to really feel like we know what's going on and not just what we're learning from what TV wants us to think.
Always great advice on so many different issues. We have a question that has come in from one of our lay missioners, Melissa Altman, specifically her daughter Evie, who just turned 10. Happy birthday, Evie. She was on Meet a Missioner a few weeks back. Evie is wondering if you liked visiting El Salvador. And then they are also asking, what is the favorite part of your ministry?
Hi, Evie. Miss you guys. I honestly think I spent a week in El Salvador in February learning about U.S. immigration policy in El Salvador. And it was really fascinating to get to see that side of it and really be informed on that side of it. And I'm not just saying this because I'm on Meet a Missioner, but I loved actually meeting the Maryknoll Lay Missioners and being able to see what we're doing and where we are and how we're touching lives in El Salvador. And of course, I loved hanging out with the Altman family. That goes without saying. What I love most about what I do really is the relationships I have with clients. It's terrifying, challenging, and gratifying at the same time. I have a final asylum hearing for somebody tomorrow. And so it's terrifying that what happens tomorrow will affect his life forever, at the same time to realize that probably if I wasn't representing Ruben tomorrow, he would be going by himself in front of the judge. There's a dearth of immigration attorneys. Las Americas provides our services to people in detention for free. So for people that can't afford to pay lawyers, and even people that can't afford, there's not that many lawyers. So knowing that what I do and what we do affects individual lives, and then at least what I do ripples out by the fact that I have contact with so many people beyond El Paso and beyond Las Americas.
Thinking of those ripple effects, there is another question from Kirsten DeMello. Do you work with grassroots Catholic groups like the Catholic Workers? Are they one of your areas of connection?
I have not seen the Catholic Worker here in El Paso. I'm not sure if it's here or not. But there's an amazing network in the Catholic community here. Of course, we have a bishop, Mark Seitz, who's very prophetic and not afraid to take a stand on immigration issues and race issues. And a lot of the people I work with, for instance, the house I live in is a community that right now has 2 Marist brothers and 2 Maryknoll Lay Missioners. There's 3 Maryknoll sisters here right now. Like I said, Hope Border Institute. So Diocesan Migrant and Refugee Services is with the Catholic Church. Hope Border Institute is a local small organization, but that really works with Catholic social teaching and migration issues. in a way, I suppose they're not as grassroots as you might be thinking when you talk Catholic worker, but they are organizations that are right here in El Paso, and working like right here with issues. There's folks that are working here and on the Mexico side of the border. And a lot of the people that we, not all, but a lot of the people that we work with at that level are people that have been formed in the Catholic Church, and a lot still people that call themselves Catholic and do this, I think, out of that Catholic formation and their faith belief.
If there's anyone else with a burning question you're hoping to ask Heidi, be sure to get those in. We have one other question from Winnie, who's wondering, I think this is something that has also made the news a lot, are there a lot of sexual harassment abuse cases, and do victims get justice?
So I don't know if you mean sexual harassment abuse in Mexico from their country of origin, in the detention center here in El Paso. Gosh. Yeah, so I'm not sure what your question is. I'll just talk a little bit about cases.
We can wait also and see, Winnie, if you want
I
to give us some clarification.
say, I can talk about cases, just gender-based asylum cases, and if Winnie, if you want to send in a clarification on that. You know, all of my work in Brazil and in Kenya and even in Chicago was related to women and justice. I worked with incarcerated women. I worked with women caught up in drug abuse. And so I've tried to focus on women here in El Paso too, and just looking at migrant women and what are the issues that affect them, and what is different for them. And not a big surprise, sexual violence is still a major issue. It's used in countries in situations of conflict. It's used in countries that don't have conflict as a power system, often as a power system to impose authority on women, not just women, also men. And so a lot of the clients that I have coming through at some point in their lives are survivors of or have been victims of sexual violence as part of their history. Do they get justice? Not sure, but we try.
So Winnie is clarifying, in detention centers, is that something you've experienced?
Yes, immigration detention is still detention. I think it's a little different because you're taking mostly a bunch of people who are concerned about getting here and getting to safety, mostly people that have never been exposed to the criminal justice system. And so, I mean, my read on this, and I have no statistics, is that it's less prevalent than it would be in our criminal detention system in the US, in Brazil, in Kenya, pretty much everywhere that I know that I've been. But we do still get allegations of sexual harassment, at least when I work with the women. Just starting to hear that, so I haven't dug into it enough to say more about that. But it is still a concern. Any institution that's a power structure, right? Any institution where you have such great power, I think creates a climate that is just ripe for that.
Thank you for sharing that. Angel Mortel says, your work is definitely heavy and probably at times disheartening, which I think maybe some folks watching are feeling a little bit of that heaviness now. So I would encourage everyone to sort of take a breath and sit with that. But she asks, along with a number of other people, have asked, how do you stay hopeful? What gives you strength to continue? How do you nourish your spirituality in all of these trying justice struggles in which you're involved?
Depends on the day. I walk every day, and that's been my MO forever. People in Brazil used to make fun of me and how far I would walk. They'd, say, is it far? And I'd say no. And then they would kind of roll their eyes. I think that's one thing that I do that keeps me balanced. Every morning I get up and I have my quiet meditation time before I start my day, also to kind of put me in focus. I think the only reason that I can stay hopeful is because I'm a person of faith. And while there's a definite struggle in that. You know, right now I'm just trying to figure out like where I fit so much injustice and the God I believe in. I mean, that's not new, but it's just so strong at this moment. But I think just that depth of faith to believe that I'm not the bottom line, I'm not the end, you know, I'm part of it is huge. And I think the other thing is just being a part of community and teams. You know, I work with a team of amazing advocates at Las Americas, mostly younger than I am. A lot of people that are from here in El Paso, and amazing advocates. And I think one, you have a bunch of people who know what you're going through and refuse to give up. And two, odds are pretty good that on the day that I'm, you know, at the bottom, somebody else is not. And so humor helps a ton. And I think that's the part of when you work at the grassroots, at the base, the maintaining relationships with the people that are engaged here, you know, that makes a huge difference. It is heavy. And even when I used to be in the prisons all the time in Brazil, we'd have that conversation. And so I think for whatever reason, God gave me this constitution that I carry that. I get very indignant about it. But 99% or 90% of the time, it doesn't pull me down. I'd like to say that my theme is cultivate indignation. Instead of having it pull me down, it should make me more outraged and indignant to work for change. So I try to do that. Last night I played cards with friends. So you just got to make sure you're intentional about it.
I love that. Cultivating indignation. That's wonderful. So I'm going to sneak two more questions in here. Thank you for those of you who are still hanging out with us. One of the questions, it's three questions. I'm going to try to summarize it into one is just about what happens with folks who do not qualify for some kind of relief and what kind of support are you able to provide them? What does that look like? And then the other question is about considering the threat of COVID to detainees, what are your thoughts on reluctance to release persons from these centers? You know, that one is probably close to your heart, knowing some of the work you've done in the past.
Sorry, I'm writing them down. So if you don't qualify for relief, I mean, in general, you're deported back to the country that you fled. And if you think about the fact that most people that flee don't have a lot of resources, so often they've borrowed money from somebody to try to get here and ask for protection. So if they're deported back to the country that they fled, they're deported, and now they're even farther behind than they were when they left. Like they might have somebody hounding them, threatening their family because they have to pay off a loan that they took, you know. There are a few other things, they're hard to get, but the judge can order you removed, or those who get to the judge actually have a tiny bit more chance than those who just get turned around at the border by Customs and Border Protection. You can ask them to pause your removal. So if you get ordered removed, for instance, I had a woman from Colombia who actually was here on a tourist visa, and when she crossed the border to go visit the cathedral in Juarez, she came back with her fiance, just an afternoon. She's been here coming on a tourist visa every year since 2012. On her way back across, she said they started asking her more questions, and then there were 4 of them asking her questions, and she got all nervous. And next thing she knew, she was ordered deported because they claimed that she was working here. She insists she was never working here. She has her own business in Colombia. She has no need to work here. So when she got ordered removed, it wasn't just, now in her case, she wasn't going back to a country that was dangerous for her, but she was going to be banned from the US for 5 years. And she has a whole life here with her fiance and knowing his family that she's come back and forth as they talk about when they're ready to get married and things like that. So you can always ask them to pause that. Like I said, it's limited success and it doesn't last forever, but in general, really long answer to a short question. If your relief is denied, you are put in line waiting for a plane to take you back to that very country where you were feeling threatened. And the other question was about COVID-19 in detention and people that are released, right? If you think about it, they're not, the people in detention are not our danger, we're their danger. They're not leaving, right? But they're exposed to the guards that come in and out. They're exposed to the medical professionals that come in and out, and they can't get away from that. So they're at higher risk for COVID-19. One of the things that Annunciation House has put into place is if, for example, someone is released from detention here in El Paso, if they consider it necessary, Annunciation House has set up a space where they can hold people in quarantine for 1 to 2 weeks until they have a testing, and then be released to go join their family somewhere, just to make sure that they're healthy and just to make sure that they're not taking COVID-19 to somebody else.
Heidi, thank you for all of your answers there. I'm going to add the cultivating indignation to my list of great quotes by Heidi. My other favorite one is that you were born with one too many unfair genes, I believe is what you say. Or
it's not fair, Gene. And so it's not fair, Gene, yeah.
I hope that we can all cultivate our indignation and our it's not fair genes so we can continue to stand up and support refugees and migrants and people on the move. So thank you for taking the time to share with us today. We really appreciate it. For those who have put questions in, if we didn't get to your questions, we will continue to monitor the YouTube and Facebook, and we will reach out to Heidi and get answers to those questions for you and post back to you. If you're watching this as a recording and questions are coming up, please feel free to send those to us and we will get you answers that way. So don't stop the questions. Heidi, we will let you get back to your hard work, and then we have some announcements for all of you watching if you want to continue to be involved this week with Refugee Day that's coming up on the 20th.
Thanks. Just to say thank you so much for being part of this and with us today. This issue is all of ours. It's not mine. It's not Mary Knowles. It's not the government's. It's all of ours. So hopefully you will cultivate more indignation and figure out how you can be a part of that in some way.
Great. So the first announcement that I have for all you watching is if you want to be a part of that by being a Maryknoll Lay Missioner, we are doing a webinar about how to become a Maryknoll Lay Missioner, what Maryknoll Lay Missioners do on the 18th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. I think we have a slide that will hopefully come up that has an email address on there. You can email join@mklm.org. I think 2 more slides, if we could click to that one real quick, and then we'll backtrack here. I'm going out of order, so I'm throwing Chris off. So join at mklm.org if you would like to join that webinar to learn about becoming a Maryknoll Lay Missioner. If you would like to stay connected this week as we look at different issues related to migration and refugees, the next one is on the 17th. There is a prayer that is being hosted by the Maryknoll Fathers and Brothers, praying with refugees. As we journey with refugees, go to maryknoll.us to register. We're also dropping that link in the comments now. On the 19th, there will be an opportunity with Maryknoll Office of Global Concerns talking about U.S. policy and how we can get involved at that level. And then, of course, next week, we'll be right back here at Meet a Missioner Monday. We will be joined by Dee Dungy, who is working in Kenya with Jesuit Refugee Services, and she will be sharing about her work with the refugee communities overseas. So we hope you will continue to engage with us. If you're looking for more information on any of these things, please reach out. Leave messages in the comments, send us an email, and we are here to support you in your journey as you get more involved with issues affecting refugees and migrants. Thank you, as always, for being here. Stay safe, be well, and peace be with you.